Southport killer Axel Rudakabana has been sentenced this afternoon in Liverpool Crown Court to a minimum of 52 years for the murder of 3 young girls and the attempted murder of 10 others in July of last year. As you can tell, I'm already fumbling my words with this because I have been following the events of today very closely, and what happens in July is just so unthinkable and so horrendous, that it makes me livid even starting to talk about it. So please bear with me on this one. Alongside the murder of the 3 girls, he also admitted to producing ricin, possessing terrorist material as well. And due to him being under 18 at the time of the attack, he automatically avoided what is known as a whole life term. However, the judge said that it is highly likely he will never be released from prison after issuing the 52-year sentence. 7-year-old Elsie Standcombe, 9-year-old Alice De Silva Agua, and 6-year-old BB King were stabbed to death last summer while attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport. Now, the far right, Nigel Farage and many others, are still using this horrific event to score political points and accuse Starmer of a cover-up. And we will talk about this and some of the things that were made public about this case earlier in a moment. However, I find it very unsettling that so many people feel they can politicize this issue without showing any form of empathy for the families of those 3 girls or the survivors. So before we discuss this, I just want to take a moment to share some of the statements made in court this afternoon. Please note what I am about to read will be distressing. A statement read by Alice's parents said, "Alice was always very kind. A world of possibilities awaited her. She was a beautiful girl. She was a strong and confident preteen with a world of dreams. That summer's day, she was so excited to go to the dance workshop. And in a matter of minutes, our lives were shattered and turned upside down. We kept up hope every second of her 14-hour fight, but when she lost her fight, we lost our lives. It shattered our souls. It feels like we're stuck in a 5D horror movie with moving pictures and moments being relived. We can't get out. Some moments are easier than others, but every day is the same. Alice is not here when we wake up, and she never will be. There's a sense of loss of foundation too. Alice was our purpose for living. So what do we do now?" Jenny Stancombe, mother to Elsie, also made a statement in court. She said, "We are not going to stand here and list everything you have taken away from us because we refuse to give you the satisfaction of hearing it. We will not let you know anything about her because you don't deserve to know the extraordinary person that she was. You know what you have done, and we hope the weight of that knowledge haunts you every single day. What you did was not only cruel and pure evil, it was the act of a coward. Though you have stolen our daughter from us, you will not take away our determination to honour her memory. We will carry her love, positivity, and her legacy forward, no matter how much pain you have caused." Now, the father of a 9-year-old girl who survived the attack asked her to explain the impact that this event had had on her life. And one thing she said really stuck with me when I read it this afternoon. She said, "When people in school asked me, 'Do you wish you weren't there that day?' I said that in some ways I wish I wasn't, but also if I wasn't there, someone else would have been stabbed and they could have died. So I'm glad I might have stopped someone else getting hurt." These are the words of a 9-year-old. No child should ever have to have thoughts like this. Now, Lewis, we'll come on to the politics and the fallout in just a moment, but I just wanted to ask you what your initial reaction is to the sentencing and the evidence and statements that we heard in court this afternoon.
Yeah, having watched the full sentencing, it seemed to me that the judge was trying to do, I believe, from my interpretation, everything he could to squeeze as much time into that sentence as he could within the limits that he was allowed. There's no point going too much into the particulars of him pleading guilty and that how affects it, but I think it was very relevant if anybody did watch the sentencing, which was very hard because they went through all the details. That he specified that under the condition of the sentence, because there's been a bit of misunderstanding about how he's been sentenced. People are saying he's only got 52 years. That's what a lot of the headlines said. Some of them were a little bit more specific and said, oh, he got for at least 52 years. It's not how it works. And the judge explained it quite well, but they didn't use his words exactly. He has been given essentially a whole life sentence. That's just not the words that have been used. He has to serve a minimum term of 52 years, and it'll be up to the parole board when he's at the age of 70 if he'd be allowed out again. But due to his conditions and his state and his lack of remorse and his behavior in court, which is probably just going to continue in prison, he'll likely never get out. And that's what the sentence that the judge gave him allowed. So hopefully this person will never, ever get out of prison. And
Mhm.
hopefully at some point he'll be able to fully feel what he did. And I hope that does happen at some point because he deserves to bear the pain that he's caused. With the
100%.
initial, sorry,
Go
go
on.
ahead. I was going to say with the victims and the families. Some of this again, I was just watching it so closely, so it's just all in my head. There were a couple of young girls who were in the courtroom as well, who did obviously get up and say their statements. Some of the statements that we were just reading out are like from before. Some of them are from during the
Mm,
court session. They didn't have to do that. It wasn't necessary, meaning it wasn't going to affect the outcome of the case. They chose and pushed to be allowed to make a statement in court. And I feel like that's very brave. And I feel like that should be commended in these circumstances because they were allowed to do that, which hopefully, in some level, will give them, I won't use the word closure, but just a level of healing, perhaps, that they were able to
mm.
face this person who've caused them and their friends and their community so much trauma that it may be helpful in at some point being able to go back to living a normal life if that ever happens.
Yeah, I think it's been a very difficult day in court for many, the friends, the families, the victims, the survivors, and for many in the press, the journalists that have had to sit through everything. I know that the families got up and left the courtroom for a short period while the judge was going over the quite graphic
Yeah,
detail of what took place. Um, and I, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that because it is truly horrific. But I wanted to just read some of the statements that I've just read,
absolutely.
just because I think that like I say, we're going to move on to the politics of it in a moment, and we're going to have that conversation. But I think all too often people are really quick to have that conversation, that they forget that this has had a real impact on real people, and a community is still mourning and probably will be for a long time. When it comes to the and just on that, I completely understand to some of our viewers, who are unable to watch this segment and listen to this. I know that I think a few people have had to leave, and I totally understand that. But I do think it's important that we still talk about this. So if anyone is affected by this story, we will not be offended at all if you need to jump ship. Um, as far as the sentencing is concerned, like you say, my understanding is it's a minimum of 52 years, and then, like you say, the parole board can then decide if they want to consider him for any release after that. But it's also my understanding that his sentence has already been put forward for review, for potentially being unduly lenient. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, because my understanding is that this is the probably one of the longest sentences handed out to anyone, particularly of that age, um, ever.
I'm not too sure on like the legal side of things. I definitely think there needs to be some room in terms of these cases where discretion can be given more to the judge. He
Mhm.
expressed in his sentencing that I can't remember the exact wording, but about how he thinks it should be deemed a terrorist act. But as he's
Mhm.
described by the legislation as it's
Excuse me.
designed, they can't define it that way. So it's almost the judge expressing his frustration in that. And again, that's nobody's fault who's currently operating
No.
in the system. It's obviously the fault of when the legislation was created. I think it was the Terrorism Act 2000. It's defined very specifically that people need to have particular motives, particular ideologies, which
Mhm.
again, to smash some misinformation, there was no particular ideology found. And
No.
just to touch on that very quickly, if I can, a lot of
Well,
am I skipping ahead? Am I skipping
no,
ahead?
no. Well, no, no. It's
Oh,
fine because I do want to ask you about that. So obviously, it appears that there were many failures from the authority. Rudy Cabana was known to social services. He'd been referred to prevent.
yeah,
He had a history of violence, and had even been suspended from school because of this behaviour. So I wanted to ask you, and you can talk about more about what we learned in court as well. But do you think that more could have been done to prevent this attack?
absolutely, 100%, 100%. This could have. You can't ever say determinatively like this would have could have 100% been prevented because we could live in a ideal world where everybody has all the resources they need and have all the resources thrown at them when they either reach out for help, which he did, or when people recognize that a person needs help, which they did multiple times. And this could have still happened, who knows. What we do know is that there were multiple failures, and there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of disinformation out there about this case, obviously starting with, which we'll move on to a bit later, about the misinformation about who this person was when it first happened. Obviously, we all know
Mhm.
that Ali Al Shakati was like a made up name. That's not who this person was. This person didn't come over on a boat a few months ago before the attack. This person was born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents who were Tutsi, and they escaped the genocide, which affected the Tutsis in Rwanda. We know that he had his family had a background of just pretty much working all their life. There's not much reporting on about anything that's been found out about the parents, because often in these cases as well, what you'll find is, when it comes to the big psycho killer cases, not to put it in that category, it'll be like, oh, perhaps there was abuse or something very traumatic happened specifically, but they haven't really been able to identify anything like that to do with his family
Yeah.
side of things. Because obviously, when we come onto the politics, the whole who he is and his identity was obviously highly politicized. But sticking with
Mhm.
like the facts of the case, is that it was found that he first reached out to help in around 2019. He rang Childline, and he said that he wanted to go into a school and use a knife to kill people. He did that anonymously, but it did say that Childline referred him to the police, and the police did actually make an engagement with him. I believe
Mhm.
they went to his home, and this is, I'm assuming, because the timeline is still not completely clear, probably the first time that he got put through to the Prevent program. There were three times he got put into the Prevent program from 2019 to 2021. That's three opportunities right there. We have obviously information about his expression in school of loving Hitler, loving certain fascists and murderers, his obsession with genocides all across the political spectrum. And of course, there was the famous a bit of information that came out sometime later about the Al Qaeda manual that was found in his home. Um, that annoyingly, I think, was reported on and released incorrectly. They should have gone a bit further when they chose to release that information, because now we only just found out this week that in fact it wasn't just an Al Qaeda manual. It was He was researching the IRA. He was researching again Hitler. He was researching and showed an obsession with multiple atrocities, multiple evil people from across history, from all the way back to Genghis Khan. This was all found on the three laptops that they found in his home, along with, of course, ricing as well, which he was trying to develop. I think, if I remember correctly, he didn't actually fully develop it, but he was getting very close to whatever the word is, like correctly producing it. So again, this idea of what his motivations were and any particular ideology. They could not define it because there was no
No.
specific ideology at all that they could find. And obviously, more interestingly, with the attack, obviously, it was talked about so much in court about how he went after women and girls, and that is agreed upon that that was his target. However, what they found in terms of his background is that there wasn't really any incelly kind of behavior there.
Mhm.
So I just think we might never know why he did what he did, which is terrible because it probably adds to the closure, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, of families, of victims, of the community, because
Yeah.
this is just going to go unknown. But again, there is no specific ideology of this person, and that's now
I
being revealed very clearly in court.
I thought it was interesting that the judge said that the, um, when the I can't remember the exact wording, but the talk around, using this word terrorism,
Hmm.
he said it misses the point
Yeah,
it's like it's almost as if, it doesn't even that underplays what it was that he did. I mean, some of these girls were stabbed over 100 times
yeah.
each. um like the horrors of the detail of this case, they they're beyond anything that I think we've seen in this country when it comes to attacks in terms of the violent level of it. um yeah,
But
it's been
I,
it's been a
but I,
day
w-
for that. Go on.
I would encourage people not to look at the um, gory side of the case. The
Yeah.
information is there; it's in the public record now. The parents have specifically asked for the media not to share the specific gory details as a request. They don't have to, of course.
Hmm. No.
Unfortunately, what happened as soon after the trial is that I think it was the Merseyside police put out a statement saying we've already told people do not share the gory stuff. It's a request from the parents because so many people on
Yeah.
platforms like X were sharing the gory details. Um, and many of which were again politicizing it.
Well,
We should
yeah,
respect the
no,
parents' wishes.
100%. And on the topic of politicizing it, in his usual style, Reform leader Nigel Farage has this afternoon written to Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner to request that she apologise. In the letter to the Deputy PM, Mr Farage said, "As you no doubt will be aware, Axel Rudikabana, the suspect in the horrific murders in Southport, has pled guilty to all charges put to him, including under Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Additionally, we know now that the Prime Minister was made aware of Mr. Rudikabana's terror links, but decided to conceal this information from the public. Shortly after the brutal attack, I questioned whether the public was being told the truth and whether this was, in fact, a terror incident, even when the police stated that it wasn't. I stated, I just wonder whether the truth is being withheld from us. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a fair and legitimate question. What I do know is that something is going horribly wrong in our once beautiful country." In response to my comments, you stated that he, Nigel Farage, must understand that you have a level of responsibility. You're a community leader, you're elected to represent your constituency, and therefore you have a level of responsibility with that. And it's not to stoke up what conspiracy theories or what you think might have happened or lean into what you think. Farage goes on to say, "I'm writing to ask you to apologise, not to me, but to the millions of Britons that you deliberately misled in choosing such an inappropriate moment to spread misinformation. By choosing to make such nakedly political points at a time of national vulnerability, you undoubtedly contributed to the civil unrest that ensued. As Deputy Prime Minister of this country, you have a duty to respond responsibly and not, ironically, create fake news by criticising others for stirring up fake news when they have done no such thing. I've no doubt that you would like to take this opportunity to correct the record." Is he taking the piss? By choosing to make such nakedly political points at a time of national vulnerability, you undoubtedly contributed to the civil unrest that ensued. Seriously, says the man who uses every national vulnerability to score political points. Farage said that he suspected Rudy Cabana was known to the authorities. Now, we know that was the case. We do now know that. But Mr. Justice Goose said this afternoon that he himself, the judge, must accept that there was no evidence that Rudy Cabana had any terrorist cause, but added that his culpability is equivalent to terrorist matters, whatever its purpose. Now, Lewis, Farage talks a lot about cover-ups. Richard Tice this evening also labelled the Southport attacks the mother of all cover-ups. Do you think Farage has been vindicated, as he might like to think? And what do you make of his suggestion that Angela Rayner contributed to the riots that we saw in the summer?
Absolutely, he's not vindicated at all one bit, and he's just continuing to politicize this. And do you know what? It just absolutely fucking pisses me off so much because this is
You and
not
me
about
both.
him. Oh, what was that?
I'm just saying, you and me both.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted or something. Then it absolutely pisses me off. This is not about him. This is not about his ideology. This is not about immigration. This is not about race. This is about a young boy who has been radicalized through whatever purpose, which we still need to yet to discover. Because again, there's no clear political motivation. And I do want to reiterate that there are multiple times where he was again referred to prevent 3 times. His parents actually had to call the police multiple times on their own child. So, a lot of people are trying to attack the parents on this. Maybe there's something deeper there. We don't know that. What we do know is that they called the police on their own child multiple times for his behavior. That after, he said he wanted to unalive people. God, get off of TikTok, Lewis. He wanted to kill people and get revenge on people who bullied him and all of this, that nothing further was done. Because when you go through the Prevent program, which, by the way, the Conservatives did a report into the Prevent program and its failures and didn't act on it. So some blame goes to them as well. The blame goes to everyone, by the way. I'm not trying to politicize this myself. I want to share the blame across the board because there are multiple failures. How is it that we can have a situation like this where this young man can reach out to help? And again, I'm not trying to humanize this person because he's done horrible things. I am trying to advocate for what we can do in the future to prevent these victims because there are failures. But he reached out to Childline when he was 15 years old and said he wanted to do bad things to people. And that should have been it. That should have been the moment where every resource is thrown at this child to get him in a better position. People are obviously talking about his autism. Obviously, it's a factor to be considered. It is not determinative of his actions in any way. When it comes to obviously his mental health, something changed in this boy. We don't know what, we don't know when, we don't know how. What we do know is that one of his former teachers said, obviously at one point he was a great student. He got Star of the Week or whatever, and all these types of things. And then from a certain age, he just literally changed. He said he was getting bullied, and again, none of these are excuses. I'm not making any excuses. I'm just laying out the reality of what happened to this person to potentially contribute to the factors and the fact that he reached out multiple times. None of these are excuses. More should have been done. The police knew about him. The school knew about him. And it is a failure of so many levels of authority. This could have been prevented. I'm not saying would have. I'm saying it could have been prevented.
And because of that, understandably, a lot of people are very angry. But many people, including people who turned up outside the court today and caused some bother, and I'm sure you'll come on to that in a moment as well, they say that, well, it's just a cover-up. It's been a deliberate cover-up, and that we should have known about it, which is what Farage is saying. Now, obviously, Starmer claims there was no cover-up. He just couldn't release the information that he had due to potentially being in contempt of court. And I reckon that's a pretty reasonable excuse, no?
Yeah, if they would have gone to his house and they would have found very clear of intention relating to one specific ideology. So if he was an Islamic extremist, and they found that he's like signed his heart or soul to ISIS or whatever it might be, they could have released that information. They didn't. They couldn't release any information on particular motives because it would have affected the case because he had no particular motive. So they were still trying to do discovery and try and find out more information about this person so they can prosecute him properly and also find where things went wrong. When it comes to the idea of, again, I mentioned it before, why this isn't defined as terrorism, I think it's terrorism. So does Keir Starmer, and they want to change the legislation, which I absolutely welcome, to make it a bit more open and not too specific. But the idea of a cover-up is just beyond ridiculous. What was Keir Starmer supposed to do to when people were burning down hotels? Is he supposed to come out and be like, "Oh, by the way, we found an Al Qaeda manual"? Like, are you kidding me? Is that what they expect? And again, he was obsessed with all atrocities across the entire world. There is no specific ideology. So releasing any information immediately about his background would have then stoked more violence and more riots, because these idiots were out rioting in the name of three dead girls that they can't even name.
And what do you
And
make of
we
this
saw that.
claim? What do you make
No,
of this claim from Farage that Angela Rayner has got a part to play in those riots?
it's just constant political football. In terms of Nigel Farage's realm of ideology, in terms of whether it's obsessing over race or Islam and immigration, it doesn't cross any of these borders. What's very clear is that our services have been severely underfunded, and it's very possible that with more resources, this could have been prevented. But even so, because the police were aware, and whoever takes care of prevent and whoever takes care of these systems, they have failed. And now an inquiry has been called, which I absolutely welcome. And from some of the statements from the families today, they welcome as well. And they said it will help them find more justice and help them find more clarity on what's happened and where the failures were. Um, but again, Nigel Farage is just politicizing this for his own sake. And it's
Mhm.
very frustrating
And
because these
people
types
are.
of. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and people are lapping this up, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about what you told me before we came on air tonight about what happened outside the court as well, and the
So
impact that that's had.
one of the saddest parts of the day for me is that not it's not about me, but you guys know what I mean, because it just wasn't well reported on. Is that after everything happened, all the sentencing, all that type of stuff, the victims' families were supposed to come out to the steps of the court in Liverpool and give their statements. They were cancelled because there were far right protesters outside, so they couldn't even allow them to have that. And they were, saying that this is a cover up and the media is lying and all of this type of stuff. So those people are there because of Tommy, because of Nigel, because they still believe this is a cover up, giving absolutely no closure, even just for the day, to the families, just absolutely stealing their moment away from them. Where they've prepared this statement, they've probably practiced it, they've maybe rewrote it multiple times, and they were, probably got their mind ready to go out and speak in front of cameras to the nation on this atrocity, and that moment was taken away from them because of these far right activists. There weren't that many there, but enough to for the authorities to be like, yeah, we can't send you out there. It's absolutely disgusting. Um, and this idea of, again, like going on the idea of a cover up, there has been no cover up. There's just failures. That's what there is. And I'm sorry, we criticize the Labour government, we criticize Keir Starmer a lot, all the time. Um, I don't think Keir Starmer or the Labour Party have actually done anything wrong here at all. This idea of him calling these people out for far right is something, and Angela Rayner stoking the far right riots, absolutely not. They went on the street because they thought this was a migrant who arrived on a boat and his name was Ali Al Shakati. Plenty of people spread this lie, including people from Katie Hopkins all the way to the Tommy Robinson types. All these types of people spread that lie because it fit their bias and it fit their ideology. And you know what they did? Remember, Callum, when we went to Downing Street when I came to meet you a couple of days after, and
Oh
we were
yeah.
like, let's go see the protest. Me and Callum happened to be in London. We got a notification on Twitter when we met up that the protesters, this was 2 or 3 days after the Southport attack, that they were outside Downing Street, and we said, let's go have a look, let's go check it out. They were there, pissed out of their head, bottles everywhere, crates of beer, no signs for these people, for these children, for these victims, no pictures of them or anything like that. They were just there to cause trouble, squaring up to the police, starting fights, getting arrested, and then they want to go on Twitter, go on the news, and say two-tier policing, two-tier Keir. Go fuck yourself. This is not about you and your ideology. These people have absolutely distorted the real situation that we've got here. And we're
Mhm.
not going to be able to make the change that we need as long as there's this proportion of the population dominating the news cycle, having TV shows on GB News, using their parliamentary privilege, publishing letters saying that there's a cover up, relating it to immigration, relating it to race. It's absolutely fucking disgusting. And they are preventing change from happening. They absolutely are. And they should be utterly ashamed of themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I think unfortunately, Lewis, I think we're going to have to end it there. Um,
But
unless there's anything else that you want to
just
touch on with this, is
yeah, just to add one more thing into all of this is that there were failures. We can't say that this could have never happened. It may have been prevented. It may not have. But there are failures that people need to be held responsible for, and we need to focus on those so we can make the change. We've made change in the past. We've successfully reduced types of crime, types of interventions, but it needs funding. It needs people to support it and people to get behind it. And we're not going to make the change while these people are out there lying, distorting, and misleading. So just make sure if any of your friends, any of your family, may say something about this case which is untrue or wrong. Don't get angry at them. There's so much information out there being flooded in the zone, but just make sure that they know actually what happened, just for the sake of the family and the memory of the children that we've lost, and the memory of the children, not the memory, the future of the children who have got to continue in their lives after going through this. And if I can add one more tiny thing, just on the politics side of it,
yeah,
Elon Musk owns a platform which is now dominated by neo Nazis who are radicalizing young people. We know from all the data how much this is rising on his platform, and Nigel Farage again was offering to receive 100 million fucking pounds off of this guy who is radicalizing our young people. We've got this circle of people pardoning white supremacists who then, by the way, that white supremacist Enrique Tarot, after he got released, he went on the Alex Jones podcast a few hours after. Alex Jones, who is funding Tommy Robinson. This circle of people are radicalizing our youth to such a dangerous point. The Prevent program, 19% is for the far right type of stuff, 11% is for Islamic terror and stuff like that, and Islamic extremism. It is on the rise. It is very dangerous. So let's just make sure we stay in reality, and all of our friends and family are staying in reality, because things are going to get worse. And I'm sorry to leave on that message, but they are. But the only way we can do it is by sticking together, making sure we put the truth out there, and fighting against it.